Hi, my name is Preslin. Hi, my name is Preslin and welcome back to my Hi, my name is Preslin and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I have 3 book recommendations that I absolutely know will catapult your reading journey and get you out of your reading slump. They're all of historical fiction genre and written by the same author. Now, I know what you're thinking. Historical fiction, snooze fest, that's not what I'm trying to do. However, historical fiction I feel like is a great place to start if you haven't read in a while, because historical fiction is things that actually happened, such as the Holocaust, but giving some fictional or imaginary ties to kind of like piece everything together. So it actually happened. There are just some fictional time periods or some fictional times, throughout the story. And also, at the end of every historical fiction book that I've read, the author's notes always mention other literary sources that you can read so that it can keep going. Okay, so once you read about the Holocaust and you want to know more about it, here are 20 other books that you can choose from, and you can keep on learning about everything that took place. So there are 3 books by Sadeqa Johnson, and I don't think she would classify herself as a historical fiction writer. However, the 3 books that I'm going to recommend are all historical fiction books, and they were all written by Sadeqa Johnson. The first one is YellowWife. Now, if you're subscribed to my channel, chances are you've already heard me talk about this book, but it's so good. I literally started it Sunday night and finished it Monday morning. You are not going to want to put it down. YellowWife is based off of the true story of Robert Lumpkin. He was a cruel jailer who, from 1844 to 1856, housed over 300,000 slaves in his jail. He was known for his cruelty, so much so that the jail was called Devil's Man Acre. In the story YellowWife, the biracial slave's name is Phoebe, and the story is told from the perspective of Phoebe being a biracial woman who is married to this cruel man, Robert Lumpkin, and they go on to have 5 children together. It's a some parts are very difficult to read. I do want to warn you about that. However, it's very interesting how the author was able to get into the mind frame, or at least attempt into getting into the mind frame of a biracial slave who is married essentially to her owner and then has 5 kids by this man. Of course, it's not a unique story. However, to live next to a slave that from over the course of 1844 to 1856 that housed over 300,000 slaves makes her a very unique woman, and the author was fascinated by that, and she decided to write this story. If you're interested in learning more, you should definitely look it up. Sadeqa Johnson actually did a YouTube video and talked about how a family trip with her how a trip with her family to Richmond, Virginia, where they got to visit the slave trail, actually led to her wanting to write the book YellowWife. Fabulous book. Absolutely can't say more good things about it. And if you're in a reading slump, or if you're trying to read more historical fiction, YellowWife is the very first book that you should pick up. Okay? All right. After you pick up YellowWife, that's all right. You're gonna stay in the same category, because then you're gonna go over to Keeper of Lost Children. Now, I'm very excited about this book. One, because this is my book club read of the month. We meet on Sunday, and I'm very excited to talk about it with a group of women. It follows the story of 3 people over 3 time periods, and the author, she's so brilliant. She does a great job of weaving together the story of the 3 people. Okay, so the author follows 3 characters: Ethel, Ozzy, and Sophia. Ethel is who the story Keeper of Lost Children is mirrored after. The real life character is Mabel. However, Ethel in this story, she is gone. Her husband, it's post World War II in Germany, and her husband is stationed out there, and so she's gone alongside her husband. While she's there, she sees this orphanage. She goes there and she's like, "Oh my God, I love these kids." What happens, and the author tells the story of how oftentimes Black soldiers would come over to Germany. They would have a relationship with the German women. They would have kids, and they wouldn't be allowed to marry the women. The women would often become ostracized from society once it's revealed that they carry these Black children, and as a result, they don't have resources and they don't have the ability to take care of the children. So children often end up in orphanages. So the main character here Ethel, she goes to the orphanage and she's asking the woman like, wow, how did all these kids get here? And then she learns about how German mothers often ostracized for having kids with black soldiers. So she comes up with this brilliant plan. She says, you know what, I can find a way for these kids to be adopted by families in America, specifically black families in America. And what started off with having so many good intentions, of course we learn, and we see this right now in society, you can have the best intentions, you can have the best plan, but if you have limited resources, oftentimes those gaps in the process ends up being the downfall of whatever it is that you're trying to do. So Sadeqa Johnson does an amazing job of kind of like telling the story of the adoption process and following the stories of the kids, and it's just very, very beautiful. And then our next character is Ozzy. Ozzy is freshly out of high school and he decides to enlist into the military, and he is stationed in Mannheim, Germany. He falls in love with this woman, Jelka, and the author follows the story of Ozzy and Jelka's love story. It's very beautifully written. And of course, and then finally, Sophia. Sophia is based in Maryland, and her story takes place in the 1970s. And she is in high school, and she is attending a boarding school where she is one of the first classes to segregate this boarding school. So the author talks about all the trials and all the different things that she goes through. But in the end, it's very, very well written. And again, the author did an amazing job of tying in all three stories together, and how Mabel truly was a keeper of lost children, and how I can't believe I didn't even know about her story. So again, the author had a plethora of like resources and books that you can read afterwards, and it was very, very beautiful. I attended a question and answer in February upon the release of the book, and it was very beautiful to hear how the author wrote the story. She said she often had like poster boards around her room, uh, trying to keep track of each of the characters and which characters she loved more than others. And personally, my favorite was Ozzy. I loved Ozzy's story, and I feel like I wouldn't say I related to it, but of all the stories, I enjoyed Ozzy's story the most. I think that's 2 out of 2. We're on a great move. We're out of our reading slump, but I have more for you. House of Eve by Sadeqa Johnson. Also really, really good. And this one only follows 2 characters during the same time period. And House of Eve takes place in the 1950s, and it follows the story of 2 women, Ruby and Eleanor. Ruby is a teenager. She's living in Philadelphia, and she is a black teenager who wants to be the first woman in her family to go to college. Eleanor is attending Howard University, and Eleanor is falling in love with this guy. He is a very, very rich black guy. He's living there. He's from Washington, D.C., and he is a part of this very, very prestigious elite family. Got a lot of money. Whereas Eleanor, let's just say she had a little bit more of humble beginnings. So in an effort to fit in, or to, make nice with the family, Eleanor really tried to place an emphasis on having a kid, hoping that they can bring them together. Eleanor can't have kids of her own, so that brings in one area of heartache in her life. So her and her husband decide to navigate adoption. Adoption for 2 black parents in the 1950s. You can imagine the complications that could arise, right? Okay, and then the author also follows the story of Ruby. Ruby is a 15-year-old teenager, black woman who wants to be the first in her family to go to college. Ruby is also from very humble beginnings, and she falls in love with a white guy in the 1950s. And the white guy is head over heels in love with her, and they end up pregnant. However, 1950s, biracial couple, acceptable during that time, so Ruby is forced to go to this maternity ward where she has to give up her baby. And the author details what it was like for Ruby in the maternity ward, how it was for other women that were also in the maternity ward, and just the heartache that she had to deal with during that time. So it's a great book. It takes place in the 1950s. It follows the story of Ruby and Eleanor, and it's a very, very beautiful story. It does an amazing job of weaving the characters together in an effort to keep the reader interested and wanting to know what's their connection. But honestly, she tells the story so good that you don't even think about the connection until you realize what the connection is. You know what I'm saying? It's so good. She's really, really beautiful. YellowWife, Keeper of Lost Children, and House of Eve. 3 historical fiction books by Sadeqa Johnson that's gonna get you out of your reading slump, get you reading for the first time in 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, right? Not to mention, always, always read the author's notes in the end because they always give good, good literary resources and other book recommendations so that you can go into an even deeper rabbit hole and get into it even more, right? Okay, so I want you to go read those books, come back, report back. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.